Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alison, the online piano and violin tutor. If the violin is shaking when you're trying to do vibrato, that is the number one sign that you are attempting vibrato too soon. Number one, the first thing you're going to need is a violin. I have been playing the violin since I was 4 years old. I went to university and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in music.
With the amazing talent that's Alison Sparrow. Alison, come out here.
So bear with me if there are any technical hitches, I'm sure it'll be fine. For about 5 years I was an examiner for the London College of Music. And over the years I've seen basically the music world from every kind of possible view really, and because of that it has enabled me to write my own violin course. Hello everyone, well, so there we go, that's kind of all you really need to know. And don't forget guys, anyone can learn to play the violin. Hello, welcome everyone to another weekly live at 5. Nice to see you all, and hello to Nicholas from Greece, nice to have you here. So in today's video, if I can get my words out, we're going to be talking about how to sight read expertly, or just generally how to sight read. Sight reading is a very crucial skill to have as a musician, and I will tell you why as we go a little bit more in detail. I feel like this is one of those subjects that just doesn't really just get discussed very much, and I think people are just all too quick to make videos on how to hold the bow and how to hold the violin and this, that and the other. But sight reading is so important. So we will get into those details in just a second. And again, hello to all my new subscribers, anybody new that's watching. I have a 1 to 30 violin course which is coming up here, and it guarantees to take you from a complete beginner to a very decent accomplished intermediate player. There are some, I always get this wrong, there are some details on the side here, and all the links to all my to the lessons are directly underneath this video. I will be putting some information on sight reading underneath this video as well. So hello everyone, let's just say hello to a few people first. We've got Liana, I think, from Malaysia. Hello. Someone from Myanmar, I think if I said that right. Chris from Dorset, hello. Chrissy from Virginia. Kirsty from Finland. Yes, I'm seeing quite a lot of the same people that are tuning in week by week. Thank you very much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Okay, let's talk about some sight reading then. So sight reading, as I said, is a very important skill for a musician to have, and the better you are at sight reading, the better or the faster you're going to be at learning new pieces of music. So learning a new piece of music is very closely linked with how good you are at sight reading, but sight reading has a certain art to it, and it is one that you've got to try and get your head around. But once you can do it and once you can manage it, your sight reading is going to kind of be shifted up to the next level. So you'll be able to pick pieces up just a lot more efficiently and a lot more quickly, and you're going to become better at reading and playing different rhythms. I've just made some notes in front of me, which is what I'm looking at here. You'll learn the key signatures better. So the key signatures, what we mean by that are, actually there's nothing on this example, let me just show you what I mean. Actually the key signature, there isn't anything here, but the key signature is between the treble clef and the time signature. So this is just in the key of C here. So there's nothing in there. So you'll start to learn the key signatures a lot better. And if you were ever in a situation where you were playing with a group of people in an orchestra or a string quartet or whatever it is that you've got going on, and they're throwing new pieces of music at you, you're not going to be all over the show. It's going to be much easier for you to get straight in there and learn and be able to play that music a lot more efficiently, because your sight reading skills are going to be up to par. So those are just a few reasons why sight reading is good. It's not essential for a musician. It's not like saying that if you're playing the violin, you've got to learn to hold your violin up the right way. It's not, it is and it isn't. It's not one of those things that, oh my God, you have to go and do sight reading or else you can't do anything. I mean, I'd say scales and arpeggios are pretty essential. Sight reading isn't essential, but my word, it's going to take your playing from here to here and beyond as well. So Sight reading is completely different to learning a new piece of music. But having said that, though, when you're learning a new piece of music, you've got a new piece of music sitting in front of you. Now, the first 2 or 3 times that you're playing that piece of music, that is considered to be sight reading. So there are some details in how we can get better at sight reading, and I'll go through that in just a minute. But when we are doing the sight reading, we want to be playing it through the first 2 or 3 times that we are playing the sight reading through. Let me say that again. The first 2 or 3 times we are playing the music through, that is going to be sight reading, if that makes sense. Once you get to about the third or fourth time through, I don't really then consider it to be sight reading, because you'll already be quite familiar with the music by then, if that sort of makes sense. So you'll then start to recognize parts and be familiar with them, and then you're not, it's not, sight reading is more like it's a surprise. You don't really know what's coming next, but once you get to the sort of third or fourth time through, it's no longer a surprise, because you're then starting to recognize the bits that are coming up, and this, that, and the other. So when I give my students a new piece of music, they're just not very good at sight reading. I don't know why it is, but they're just not very good at sight reading. But why is it that they still manage to go away and learn a piece of music and come back a week or 2 weeks later and they can learn it and they can play it? What's the difference? Surely it doesn't matter, as long as they are coming back 2 weeks later, 1 or 2 weeks later, whatever, and they're playing the piece of music. But it does matter, because when they play a new piece of music, if I get a piece of music and I put it in front of them, they can't play it. They just can't play it. And then what they then have to do is take the music away and play it in their own time. And that's a kind of skill that you're missing out on. Being able to look at a piece of music and play it through as accurately and as well as you can the first time through is a particular skill, and is a particular art to do. So it's just, the better you are at sight reading, the faster you are going to be at learning new pieces of music. So if you are learning a piece of music and you're not sight reading it, you're never really going to know where you are in the music. It's just, I don't know, it's difficult to explain, but you never really understand the music because you're never properly really playing it through, because you're just going away and you're learning that music in your own time. Someone's just put, sight reading is torture. Sight reading is torture at the moment, but I'm going to give you some hints and tips on how you can move forward with the sight reading. Sight reading isn't torture, I promise you. Nobody likes doing sight reading, but sight reading, it isn't torture. So let's go into some hints and tips. So before I get my students to start doing some sight reading, I tell them to imagine that they're in an exam situation where an examiner would be marking or scoring them on 3 points. I will put these in the description underneath for you to refer to later if you like. So this goes for exams that we do in the UK as well. So I know in America, I don't think you have graded exams or anything like that, but in the UK we do have graded exams, and we have a syllabus which is set of some scales and arpeggios. Depending on the level that you're on, you'll have to do a certain amount of scales and arpeggios, and the examiner will choose a few out of maybe a dozen. So you don't know what you're going to get picked, but you need to learn them anyway. So you'll have some scales and arpeggios or technical work. You'll have to choose three contrasting pieces of music out of a book, and each one will be from a different section. So you'll choose one piece from that section, one from that section, and one from that section. And then you will have some ear tests. So the examiner will play whatever it is on the piano, and you've got to listen to it back and give him the answers to the questions. We know what the tests are going to be beforehand. Obviously, we know what the type of test is. We obviously just don't know what the actual test is. And then the final part of the exam is to do some sight reading. So this is where we imagine that we're in a sight reading room and we're being marked out of 30 points, and we're being marked out of three things. Now, the first thing is starting, stopping, or hesitation. So when you're playing a piece of music, are you going all the way through from start to finish, or are you kind of starting and stopping? Hello, Katie. Nice to see you again. Whether you're starting and stopping, you're hesitating, or that kind of thing. The second thing is the rhythm accuracy. How accurate is your rhythm? And the third thing is note accuracy as well. So how accurate your notes are. Okay. So each one will be marked out of 10. So starting and stopping will be marked out of 10. The accuracy of the rhythm will be marked out of 10, and your note accuracy will be marked out of 10. So that is 30 points. The next thing I would do is get my student to basically have a go at it, and then I ask them to mark themselves. So what usually happens is that once they've finished their sight reading, I ask them to mark themselves out of 10 on starting and stopping and hesitations. And usually they don't score very well because they stopped and started, hesitated, and all that kind of thing all over the show. So they get no points, nil point for stopping, starting, and hesitations. Next, we mark them on number 2, which is rhythm accuracy. Now, that goes hand in hand with number 1. So because they stopped and started and hesitated all over the show, the rhythm has gone to complete pot. They've got no rhythm because they stopped and started. And then the third one is note accuracy. Now, some of the notes may be accurate, so you don't have to get the rhythm accurate to get the sound of the notes, because the notes are basically referring to what finger goes down on what string. So some of the notes may be a little bit accurate, but their rhythm is going to be nothing, and they're going to have stopped and started all over the show. If they bodged up number 1, they're going to be definitely bodging up number 2, and vice versa. But I don't know, maybe we can give them 1 or 2 marks out of 10 for note accuracy. So then we mark it all out of 30, and it seems like they're only getting about 2 or 3 out of 30, which is pretty rubbish. So the answer to that is, the key to sight reading is to always look ahead. Now that seems really, really obvious, but most people just don't do it because they're too busy focused on what they're looking on at the moment. So how do you know what's coming up if you haven't seen it? So for example, let me just get a piece of music here. This is just a random piece of music from one of my books. So if you were looking at this piece of music, so the first thing I would do is to have a whole look at the piece of music. I would scan it through from just start to finish, just to see if there was anything that I thought, I didn't quite like there. The first thing that springs to my mind is this little part here. I'm not really loving what that's doing there. And this little part here, I'm not particularly loving what that's doing there. So I might just give that a little extra look initially, just so that I'm aware of something that looks a bit dangerous when we're coming up to it. So what we're going to be doing is when we're going to be starting here and I'm going to be playing these notes, my eyes are always going to be looking there. So I'm going to be playing here, my eyes are going to be there. I'm going to be playing, getting confused here, my eyes are going to be down here. Sorry, the camera is backwards. So playing here, but the eyes are here. Playing here, but the eyes are there. So I'm always looking a bar ahead. Now you might think that you're not going to be able to do that, but actually you can do that. That's really not as complicated as you think it is. But always look ahead, because that is going to help you. And it seems fairly obvious, but that's how you do it. You always want to try and just be sort of looking ahead as much as you possibly can. So that's the key to sight reading. The golden rule of sight reading is to always keep going. If you always keep going, then your rhythm and accuracy is always going to be perfect. Remember, we said we were marking our sight reading out of 3 points. We've got our rhythm and accuracy, we've got start, stop, hesitations, then we've got some rhythm and accuracy, and then we've got some note accuracy as well. So key to sight reading is to looking ahead. Golden rule is to always keep going. And before you start, you want to clock things like the key signature. So are there any sharps and flats? Are we playing F sharp, C sharps, B flats, E flats? If we're playing an E flat, we certainly don't want to be playing any open E strings, because that's just going to sound plain awful. So clock certain things before you look through the piece of music. So there are no rules to say that you can't just spend just a moment or two just having a look through this before you start. You want to kind of think of sight reading as a mini exam. So when you are at home and when you are learning a new piece of music, take that as an opportunity to do some sight reading. The other thing you can do is get some really, really easy pieces of music from the internet, pieces of music that you can do, but ones you've never played before. Put them in front of you. Just spend a moment or two just having a look. Have a look at the key signature, making sure we're not playing F sharps and C sharps and E flats and B flats and all that kind of thing. And then have a look through just to see if there's anything that, you know, you might bungle up on the way through. So we've got some, you know, we've got some tricky B flats that are going up here. Then we've got a B natural in the next bar, followed by an F sharp. So anything like that that you think, oh, you know, don't really like the look of that. So just clock it with your eyes, have a look at it, so that when you get there, it isn't catching you off guard. It isn't catching you by surprise. So you think, oh crap, I don't know what to do. Then you pause, then you stop, then you fumble, and the whole thing has just collapsed. And that destroys the momentum and the whole point of the sight reading. So have a little look through it, and then you can get going with your sight reading. But it's always a good idea to, when you're practicing sight reading or want to learn sight reading, it's always a good idea to choose pieces that are a little bit lower than where you're at. To learn the art of sight reading, I wouldn't want to be doing this with pieces of music that you are actually trying to work on, pieces that you feel are at the current level you are now. Try and learn sight reading with pieces that are just a little bit underneath that. So, for example, if you're on book 2 of my course, for example, something like that, why don't you go back to the pieces in songbook 1? For example, any pieces that you missed out in songbook 1, or just have a look on the internet for some sort of easy pieces. Okay, where are we in my notes? So let's have a look, and yeah, I want to see if we've got any questions that we've got here. So right, I really can't pronounce your name. Someone's just said, no, I'm not even gonna pronounce that. I bought your complete course today. I'm so excited. Thank you. You're gonna enjoy the course. Just take your time and follow it as you should do, and you'll be great with it. What else have we got here? Someone's from Nigeria. Hello from India. Algeria. There is quite some geography here, isn't there? Let's have a look. Yeah, ships ahoy. Look over the music before starting. Very important. Well, yes, because how are you supposed to know, you know, what's coming if you don't know? Yes, thank you. Shall I attempt that Manouchier? I think if I got that right. Apologies if I haven't. Okay, so where you are with the sight reading then. So the first thing that you want to be doing is have a look at the piece of music. But here's the key to sight reading. When you are looking at a piece of music, so let me just get that other piece that I had up. So let's just say, for example, this was a piece of music that you were looking at. You want to, and this is the hard part, you really want to ignore the rhythm to start with and just play the notes. So that actually sounds quite complicated to do. It's very difficult for me to sort of demonstrate that, because the pieces that I've got playing that I can show you, they're obviously easy for me to sight read, but I'll put some notes in the links underneath it. But what you want to try and do is ignore most of the rhythm and just get going with the notes. So what stops people playing initially are the three things. You know, we talked about the rhythm, the stopping and starting and the hesitation. That was point 1. The rhythm accuracy and the note accuracy. So if you stop, start and hesitate, your rhythm is going to be gone as well. So if you're stopping and starting, then you're not going to be getting the rhythm completely accurate either, are you? So if you push through and focus more on the notes, then that will allow you to push through from start to finish and not worry so much about the rhythm. So let me just perhaps I can just give you a quick example of just sort of what I mean. So the piece of music that we've got here, you'll probably recognize it anyway. Sorry, my violin's a little bit out of tune. That's a bit better. So that's what you would need to be doing for Swan Lake, for example. But let's say I wasn't really quite sure on the rhythms and I was stopping and starting. So what I really want to do is just focus on those notes. Kind of like that. I know it doesn't sound quite right, but can you understand the purpose is that you want to push forward. Everybody can read the notes on the music, and obviously by the sight reading I'm assuming that you can read notes. You don't really want to be doing the sight reading if you're not at a point where you can actually read the notes on the music yet. So you want to be able to read the notes, but I want you to just focus on pushing through each note and not worrying about the rhythm. So when you're playing a piece of music, there are two things that are really focused in your mind. What note are you playing and how long you have to hold that note for at any one particular time. Now, when you've got those two things compressed in together, that is where it gets a little bit confusing, and that is where it gets complicated, and that is where it all falls apart, because you've got two things that you're trying to focus on. You're trying to look at the notes and you're trying to get the note accurate, but you're also trying to get the rhythm accurate as well. Now, remember my student that we were marking out of 10, and I asked them to do a little bit of sight reading, and they went and they stopped and started, hesitated all over the place. So we didn't give them anything for that. Point number 1, stopping and starting, we got nothing for that. Point 2, which was the rhythm accuracy, well, obviously they got nothing for that because they couldn't even get point 1 right, so they got no points, nothing out of 10 for the rhythm and accuracy. The third one, we gave them a couple of points because they got a couple of the notes correct, so we had to give them some points for that. However, it's almost as if saying if they ignore point 1 and they ignore point 2, so point 1 is stopping and starting, making sure you push through. Point 2 is the rhythm and accuracy. Point 3 is the notes. Let's mark them again. So let's imagine now we've got our student and they don't care about the rhythm now. They're just focused on looking at the notes. So they don't care how many beats this note is. They don't care how many beats this note is. They're not actually, I've got the rhythm written underneath here. So they don't care. It's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3. They're not caring about that. All they're caring about now is playing an E, an A, a B, a C, a D, an E, a C, an E, a C, an E, an A, and so on and so on. So let's imagine that they don't really care about the rhythm. One of those two things they don't care about, and they're focusing on the notes. So they're now focusing on the notes and they're getting all the notes done and correct. So what can we give them for stopping and starting and hesitation? Well, actually, because they ploughed all the way through, we can pretty much give them, maybe 9 or 10 out of 10 because they didn't worry about the rhythm. They just kept pushing through. It maybe sounded horrendous, but they just kept pushing through. So we can give them 9 or 10 out of 10 for the keeping and going because they didn't stop, start, and hesitate. And then what about the rhythm or the accuracy of the notes? So probably nothing for the rhythm and accuracy because that's not going to be very good. So we're not going to give them anything out of 10 for that. And the third one is the notes. Well, the notes were pretty much all perfect, so we can give them 9 or 10 out of 10 for that. Then all of a sudden, when we mark them again, they're getting 20 out of 30, or maybe 18, 19 to 20 out of 30, and they're only losing the points on the rhythm accuracy. But, and here comes the key thing, once you've learned to push yourself forward and forget about the rhythm, so to speak, when I say that, I'm not telling you to completely just forget about the rhythm and just, stuff the rhythm. It doesn't really matter. Try and do as much of the rhythm as possible. For example, if this note is worth 2 beats, hold it for 2 beats. When you get to more complicated rhythms like this and you're not quite sure, it doesn't really matter. Focus on getting the notes. So once you focus on pushing yourself through, i.e. you're not worried about the rhythm anymore and you're just worried about getting those notes correct, once you get that in your head, then you can work on adding the rhythm in after that. I can't really convey enough to you how difficult students find it to get that concept out of their head, because We know Swan Lake as da 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 da. That's how we know the piece of music. And granted, if we're sight reading, we might not, we might not know how the piece goes, and it doesn't matter, because if we're good at sight reading, that doesn't matter anyway. But the rhythm can always come later. But do you understand what I mean? If you push through and you're not worried about the rhythm and you get that out of your head, and that's quite that does play around with your mind quite a little bit, because as musicians we're focused on rhythm and the notes and everything, and we want to get that right. But if you just go with me here, if you abandon that portion and just focus on the notes, just focus on pushing forward, so we can look at the notes and we can see what the notes are. So put it this way, let's say for example I was doing the test and I did this. So we all know what that song was anyway, but there was no rhythm in there. However, mark me out of 10. What did I get out of 10 for stopping and starting? 10. Perfect 10, because I didn't stop, I didn't start, and I didn't hesitate, and I didn't do any faffing around. So I get 10 out of 10 for the stopping and starting and the hesitation. Now, what did I get? What would I get out of 10 for rhythm accuracy? Nothing. Because, let's face it, there was no real rhythm in there. So I got nothing out of 10 for that. What did I get for note accuracy? 10 out of 10, because my notes were absolutely perfect. So can you see I'm scoring higher with the note accuracy and pushing forward? So that's given me 20 out of 30. But that isn't really sort of quite the point with that. The point is that I've now learnt to start a piece of music and I'm going to keep trucking through. I'm not going to stop until I get to that end of that piece of music. That is the concept I am trying to pass on to you guys, and that is the part that's very hard. So abandoning that rhythm is the hardest thing to do, and not stopping and starting and trying to push through is very, very hard. But it's always easy to look at those notes and just play those notes and not worry too much about the rhythm. I mean, if you can slip in a little bit of rhythm in there. Someone's just said 5 out of 10 for rhythm. Oh, thank you. But mostly nothing for rhythm, because let's face it, the rhythm was mostly not very accurate in there at all. John, I will answer your question in just a second about bowing. So yeah, do you sort of see what I mean? So it's an art form to try and just push through, but that's what you need to do. And then afterwards you can go in and you can put the rhythm in. But that is the art of sight reading. That is how you are going to do sight reading. And sight reading is really the idea of getting from there down to there all in one foul swoop without farting around and messing about and faffing around and all this kind of stuff, because you're never going to get there. If you have to faff around so much on a piece of music, I'm telling you guys, it's going to take you forever to learn a piece of music. But in a very crude way, if I can get from start to finish, I'm not going to torture you with it all now, but if I can get from start to finish just playing all of those notes, stuff the rhythm, but just get from there to there, and then once I've understood that concept of sight reading, then when I'm actually doing real sight reading, I can start then to put the rhythm in. But the hardest part is to keep that brain going, to keep you going and not stopping from there to there. Then when I add the rhythm in, that's going to make me so much better at sight reading. So sight reading is a definite art form in itself, and it's what most people can't do, because people just think that sight reading is just playing a piece of music at sight. It is, but there is that kind of skill to it, if that sort of makes sense. Right, John, bow management question. How do professionals not run out of bow? Is there a method? Example, I tend to shorten my full notes because I run out of bow. Yes, bow management. So, I mean, if you run out of bow, you just change direction of the bow. But I understand what you mean. If you are playing something, it depends what you're playing. If you're playing long notes, Let me just turn my microphone down a second so it's not so loud. So that is all to do with the bow management. So that is more about how long I'm playing those notes for and how much bow do I know I'm going to have. Now, I think part of the answer to this question is probably something that you will learn in time. So, John, I don't know how long you've been playing for. Maybe you can pop it in the chat box, whichever side it's at. It's that side for me. Pop it in the chat box. Let me know how long you've been playing for. So, part of the answer to that is just understanding how long a note is going to be playing for, how long you're going to be holding that note for, and therefore how slow do I go. So how fast or slow do I move my arm in conjunction with the note that I've got to be playing. But we don't always want to be starting from here and each note ending up there. You know, we don't want to be doing that kind of thing. You know, that's just impossible to do, isn't it? So I guess running out of bow is just dishing out the bow proportionally to how long your notes are. If you've got a very long note, for example, then obviously you want to be quite slow with the bow, but also you want to be nice and consistent to make sure you've got a nice smooth bow. So I think a good exercise to remedy that and help you with that is going to be just exactly what I just did there. So set a timer if you like, or on your phone, and see how long you can hold that note for. And trying to keep it as good quality as you can. So you don't want to be so slow. I mean, that's silly slow there, but now you can hear that the quality, I mean, that's just not a nice note to play anyway. So you don't want to be too slow, but that's a good way of doing it, because then you are teaching yourself the proportion of how slow to kind of bow. So if you're referring to that kind of thing, then that would just be the answer to that. But mostly running out of bow is gonna be something that you will get better at in time as you're starting to kind of get better and learn and progress and all those other things. Anmol Ray, hello, nice to see you again, says, sight reading is always a challenge for me. Even when I see basic quaver runs especially, everything just goes out the window. Yes, so that's exactly what I'm talking about. So the whole point of sight reading is that you want to just familiarise and get yourself from the start to finish as quickly as humanly possible without any stopping and starting. The way I said it then, the way I've been explaining it in this video, meaning that your rhythm just goes to pot. So all you're doing is just concentrating on playing the notes, and if we play the notes and we don't really worry about the rhythm all too much, try and get some if you can. But you know, if you've got those quick what did you say, the quaver runs or anything like that, then just play them as notes, because when you come to some quaver runs like this, for example, that's going to stop you dead in your tracks, and then you've kind of ruined the whole stop start thing, and then it's no longer sight reading, because then you've stumbled on this part and then you've stopped, and then you're going to be going, right, that's an A, that's a B, and now you've gone off into something completely different. Now you're not sight reading it, you've bypassed that, forgotten about sight reading, and now you're actually learning it. But if you were better at sight reading, which is the concept of getting from there to there as well as you possibly can, then you are going to be better at learning pieces as quickly as possible. And the only way to get good at sight reading is to almost force yourself to keep going in that kind of way. Right, let's have a look. Katie, I remember having a hard time to forget about the rhythm when I was having a lesson and focus more on the note. It's hard. Yes, so this is Katie, everyone. She's in Quebec. I used to teach Katie Skype lessons. When was it? We must have done Skype lessons for a good couple of years or so, but this was going back about 2-3 years, something like that, I think. So yes, it is really hard to forget about rhythm, because it is something that you don't want to do, because it is ingrained into us from day one as musicians and violinists to get that rhythm right. But remember, sight reading is all the way over here. Learning a piece of music is all the way over there. They are two very, very, very different things. Do you remember the student that we had, that I gave a piece of music to, brand new piece of music? There he is. He's got his music there. I sent him away to go and learn it, and he comes back the week later, and he can, he does a decent job with playing it all the way through. But did he sight read it through? No, he didn't. He didn't bother doing any sight reading. He just learnt it, which meant he did more of what Anmol says, where, what did you say? Even when you see basic quaver runs, everything just goes out the window. So yes, so when you get to difficult passages like the quaver runs, you're stopping and you're thinking, right, that's an A, that's a B, that's a, and that is now, the other way around, that is now learning. And that is now not sight reading. They're two completely different things. Sight reading is almost ungodly. It's almost as if I am telling you the opposite of everything that any musician would ever say to you. But for me and how I teach it, that is the way I break down, and that is how I teach how to do sight reading. Katie, we stopped in 2019. Yeah, really, was it that long ago? Yeah. Okay, Anmol, March from Songbook 1 is a perfect example. Everything sounds great until I get to the end with those relatively fast quaver runs to play. So what you're talking about now, though, is not really sight reading. You're now past that concept of sight reading. So remember when I said earlier, sight reading is, you'll get about 2 or 3 goes out of sight reading before you'll then start to clock and remember what is coming on, and then it's no longer sight reading. Sight reading is more like a surprise as you're going along. You've got to know, it's like being blindfolded. You've got no idea where you're going, turning up to that surprise party. So sight reading is more of a didn't expect that kind of thing. It's a surprise. But once you get to playing it through 3, 4, 5 times, it's no longer a surprise anymore. So then you're past the sight reading, that's done and finished, and now we're on to the next portion, which is actually learning. So to help you with that little bit, if you're looking at March from Songbook 1 with any little quaver runs, focus in on that quaver runs. You haven't said exactly, Anmol, you haven't said exactly what the problem is with that, but I can just imagine that if you've got quaver runs, isolate them. So for example, if I was just going to play this first bar here, which is this. Actually, let me play the first. Let me play the first 2 lines. Sorry, the first 2 bars or the first 2 measures. And let's say we couldn't quite do the quaver run that was there. All we want to do is just